One of the most hated kings in history is King Henry VIII. After an accident, while fighting in 1536, he got terrible leg ulcers and had to limp through 10 years of unbearable pain that could have made Kaiser Soze look good. He looked like he was alone with their coffee. However, it's possible that Hank's miserable disposition was due to a terrible leg injury. Let's look at everything you didn't know about Henry VIII's sore leg today. Before we begin, please make sure you have subscribed to the Time Tales History channel. Then, leave a comment telling us about other times in history you'd like to learn more about. Alright, let's hop. Henry VIII is one of the most infamous people in history, which is why he keeps showing up in strange history shows. During his rule, Hank killed more than 57,000 people. His changing wives were so famous that it caused problems in the Catholic Church, and was even turned into a Broadway musical. He wasn't a good person. However, Henry wasn't always a bad king. As a young king, Henry was looked up to and showed potential. But things changed when he thought Catherine of Aragon, his wife, would not be able to have a son. Something that was called the King's Great Matter, which Catherine must have liked as a code word. Not long after that, he fell in love with Anne Boleyn. He then declared his marriage to Catherine null and void by attacking Catholicism. Important people like Pope Clement VII, Martin Luther, and Cardinal Thomas Wolsey were caught in the battle, until Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, finally said that the marriage should not have been valid. When you're king, you usually get what you want, but sometimes you have to work for it. But 3 years later, one thing would happen that would change their whole lives. Henry took part in a jousting contest in 1536. The king missed Sir Henry Norris and fell off his horse during the battle. So scared was the horse that it fell on top of the king, making it look like a wrestling match at a state fair. The queen was knocked out, and since she was pregnant at the time, she saw the whole thing. It's possible that the shock of Henry's injury and the fear that he might not make it out alive caused her to miscarry, which would finally lead to her death. You already know where this is going if you watched The Tudors on Showtime. Henry lived, but his legs were broken in several places. He made it out alive, but his whole attitude changed. People who knew him well started calling 1536 the king's annus horribilis, or his terrible year. In the 16th century, getting medical care was like gaming, but instead of counting cards, you counted scars. Antibiotics were not even thought of yet, so medical information wasn't exactly cutting edge. However, did they still give you those lollipops for being good? The king had to depend on his doctors to help him heal after the horse accident. The royal doctor, on the other hand, saved Henry's life. But, as we already said, medicine at that time wasn't very accurate. At first, the king seemed fine, but then he got painful blisters all over his legs. The medics did everything they knew how to do, but the bleeding wounds wouldn't heal. I hope you weren't eating while you watched this. Historiographers say that Henry's behavior and attitude changed for the worse soon after he gets lesions. And just 6 months after the accident, Henry ordered the death of Anne Boleyn. This was partly because she had a miscarriage, and he used false charges of treason and incest to get her killed. It was kind of him to have his main man, Thomas Cranmer, end the marriage before Anne was taken out. The next day, after Boleyn was put to death, Henry proposed to Jane Seymour, and they got married 10 days later. Henry and Seymour had a son, but the baby died soon after birth because of problems. Henry gained a lot of weight because of all of this and his ulcers, which were getting worse. Royals are known for eating too much and having too much access. Henry VIII was no different, but he did a lot of things for most of his life. He was very into sports, and he played them all the time. Henry was 210 pounds and 32 inches around the middle when he was in his 20s. That person isn't even big enough to play the defensive line. I guess he wasn't that into sports because he could barely work out after getting sores on his legs. Also, he tried to keep up with public events, even though he knew it was bad for him. To be honest, Henry wrote a message to Thomas Howard III, Duke of Norfolk, that you should not share with anyone else. We have a joke in our legs, and the doctors say we shouldn't go too far in the heat of the day. Instead of leading the kingdom in fear, Henry ate, drank, and enjoyed himself. As part of his plunge into access, Henry wrote what were called the Ordinances of Elton. These were detailed lists of all the foods the king was supposed to eat every day, including 20 gallons of beer and wine, a wide range of birds, from pheasant to quail, that could be eaten, and plain old butter and eggs. He pretty much ate everything on the Cheesecake Factory menu every day. Over 10 years, his actions hurt his body badly. Henry had put on so much weight by 1546 that he had to be moved into wooden chairs and could no longer lift himself. A hoist had to help him mount his horse. That horse had to hate his job so much. Henry's last armor showed that he was over 300 pounds and had a 52-inch waist, which meant that he might have been a late-round pick for a team with low seats. But the sores on his legs weren't the only thing that was making his health worse. The many broken bones he got in the fencing accident were a big reason for his leg ulcers. But Henry's clothes also made things worse. As a young, good-looking king, he liked to show off, especially his calves, in the Squidward way. He even took part in calf muscle bulging events in the 1500s, which sounds like a scene from Top Gun that was cut. During a letter exchange, Venetian ambassador Justiniana Wiener said that Henry was the most handsome potentate I ever set eyes on, above the usual height, with an extremely fine calf to his leg. Think about Justiniana's diary. Henry VIII couldn't help but show off his beautiful legs by putting tight garters around the top of each calf. He kept doing this even after he got hurt and his health got worse. Thrombosis, blood clots, and varicose veins can all be caused by clothes that are too tight around the middle. At the time, though, none of this was known. There is a good chance that Henry's clothing choices caused some of the leg problems he had later in life. Talk about going through hell for fashion. What's life's most important thing? Henry probably got leg ulcers because he broke several legs in a fencing accident or because his garters were too tight. But that didn't stop scholars from looking for other reasons why Henry had such bad ulcers. At some point, the idea that the king had syphilis spread because he was sick so often, both physically and mentally, and it was hard for him to breathe. But most modern historians don't agree with the idea. The king may have been a carrier of the disease, which means that he could have given it to his wives, who then gave it to their children. However, there is no record of him getting mercury treatments or being out of the public eye for a long time. The idea is also not supported by the fact that none of his wives have been treated or shown any signs. Seeping leg cuts are excruciatingly painful and do not heal spontaneously, therefore they are undesirable. There's no question that Henry VIII was in a lot of pain every day. To help him feel better, his doctors used burning hot irons to seal off the ulcers. Medieval medicine had to be scary, or it wouldn't be medieval medicine. Sadly, burning the pain away didn't work very well, and things got worse for the king as if they were already bad. There was no anesthetic used during these procedures, and the open wounds let diseases grow. His sores gave off such a strong smell that people 3 rooms away could smell them. It was someone who passed the royal clothespins. Henry had ulcers on his legs, which historians have talked about for a long time. But talking about them during his rule was wrong and could have killed him. After the Pope stopped being a check on his power, the king wanted to be seen as strong. After a while, Henry lost his mind and started killing lords, wives, and subjects by cutting off their heads. Henry Courtenay, 1st Marquis of Exeter, and Henry Pole, 1st Baron Montague, were 2 of the people he killed and were publicly charged with treason. Henry made sure that these 2 men were in the right places, so he must have been very mad when the 3 Hanks were broken up. Courtenay and Pole were publicly charged with taking part in what would become known as the Exeter Conspiracy. This was said to be an attempt to get rid of Henry VIII and replace him with Courtenay. Experts say that the attempted coup was sparked by Henry's criticism of the Catholic Church and the removal of power from the Church of England. However, Henry made it even more personal. A witness at their trial said that they talked about the king's health rudely. It was said that the men said, "He has a sore leg that no poor man would be glad of, and he shouldn't live long for all his authority next gal. He's going to die quickly. His leg will kill him, and then we'll have a happy party." To say the least, Henry was angry, so he cut off their heads. They should have known what was coming, though. It became a defining move. Of course, it was dangerous to question the king, and as Henry VIII's legs got worse, he hit many more people until the end of his reign, according to a French doctor who tried to help him. You won't meet any great lords in this country whose loved ones haven't had their heads cut off. If Major Bio's open wounds weren't bad enough, King Henry VIII probably also had diabetes and high blood pressure, and his doctors were worried about how much he ate and drank all the time. As it turns out, eating about 5,000 calories a day isn't good for you unless you're the Rock or training to beat the Rock. The doctors told the king to cut back, but he stubbornly refused. As a result, people in the royal court started making jokes about his eating and drinking habits, such as, "The king is very fat and marvelously excessive in eating and drinking," which led to the claim that he is often of a different opinion in the morning than after dinner. To put it another way, Hank is cranky until he eats his cheeseburgers. We know now that Henry's extreme overeating puts him at a high risk for obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure. Vascular diseases, like Henry's leg sores, can get a lot worse when these diseases are present. If any of these things happened to the king while he was dealing with his leg sores, they might have made them worse. He did, though. Based on clues and observations made after the fact, historians and medical professionals have different ideas, but no one knows for sure. No matter what happened, Henry's health problems got worse over time, and he died at age 55 from kidney failure. Someone probably played a soft version of Herman's Hermit song on a lute next to his bed. What do you think? Was Henry VIII's bad behavior a result of a leg injury? Or was he just a real jerk? Tell us in the comments, and while you're here, take a look at these other videos from Time Tales History.